My son and his wife said, "We sold your beach house, Mom," like it was a casual line from a dinner conversation, like they hadn't just ripped out a piece of my soul and priced it online. I remember the way she smiled when she said it. Practiced, polite, the kind of smile that hides fangs, and him standing beside her, avoiding my eyes like a guilty child rehearsing someone else's script. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stirred my tea, the spoon hitting porcelain soft, steady, surgical. That beach house wasn't just property. It was my history. My late husband built it plank by plank when we still believed family meant forever. "She handled all the paperwork," my son mumbled, his voice small, shrinking into hers. "Of course she did. That woman could turn affection into an asset faster than a signature dries." For a moment, and I let silence fill the room, heavy, deliberate. Then I said quietly, "I hope you got a fair price." Her eyes glimmered, relief, triumph, stupidity. "More than fair," she said, "enough for us to move forward." Move forward. Such innocent words for betrayal. But here's the thing they didn't know. That house wasn't under my son's name. It never had been. And the lawyer who handled every paper, every transfer, every clause was my brother. The deed, locked tight under a trust they couldn't touch, not even if they sold the ocean itself. So I smiled, calm, composed, like every mother before a storm. "Then I suppose," I whispered, "you've just sold someone else's dream." "Stay till the end. You'll see why selling my house was the last deal they ever made." The next morning, the house smelled of burnt toast and betrayal. They were sitting at my kitchen table, her in that silk robe she always wore like a trophy, him with guilt heavy in his shoulders. "Mom," my son started, "you've been so alone since Dad passed. We just thought—" His wife cut in, voice smooth and polished. "You don't need all that space anymore. The beach house was too much for you." Too much. That's what they call memories when they want to erase them. I folded the newspaper slowly, keeping my hands steady. "Did you at least keep the family photos?" I asked, calm, quiet, cruelly polite. She smiled. "Oh, we took pictures before selling. Digital's easier." Digital. The new word for disposable. I looked at my son then. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He used to run on that beach, chasing kites, collecting shells, laughing with sand between his toes. Now, he just stared into his coffee, like he wished he could drown in it. "I see," I said softly, taking a sip of my tea. "And when does the sale go through?" Her lips curved with confidence. "It already has." There it was. The stab. Not with a knife, but with finality. I nodded, pretending to absorb it, but inside the storm stretched its limbs. You see, when people think they've outsmarted you, you don't correct them. You let them build a tower of lies tall enough to collapse on themselves. As they spoke about their new chapter, I noticed the small things, the way her hand rested possessively on his knee, the way he smiled, mechanical, tired, the faint tremor in his fingers whenever she looked away. That tremor told me more than words ever could. "I'm happy for you both," I said finally. Her eyes gleamed. "Thank you, Mom." "We knew you'd understand." Oh, I understood perfectly. I understood greed dressed as love. I understood manipulation disguised as care. And most of all, I understood timing. Later that afternoon, I stood by the window watching them load their car, her bright scarf fluttering like a flag of conquest. My son waved half-heartedly. "We'll call you once we settle in." I nodded, smiling like the fool they thought I was. But my phone was already in my pocket, message drafted and ready. To my brother, the lawyer. Activate the clause. They sold property not theirs to sell. By sunset, my brother replied, "Already done. Let them sign their own downfall." I slept that night with the calm of a woman holding thunder in her chest. The next day, my son called. His voice was tight, urgent. "Mom, there's an issue with the sale." The lawyer said, "Which lawyer?" I interrupted gently. He hesitated. The one the buyers hired. Something about ownership documents not matching the records. Oh dear, I murmured, stirring my tea. Must be a mistake. Maybe check with your step-uncle. You remember Richard? Silence. Then a slow, dawning realization. Uncle Richard? He's the one who— Yes, I said, voice calm, almost motherly. Handled all my legal affairs, including property trusts. He exhaled shakily. Mom, what did you do? Nothing, I said sweetly. Just what any woman does when her children forget who built their foundation. He didn't speak after that, but I could hear her voice in the background. Sharp, angry, blaming, the sound of control slipping. That was the first crack. And once a crack appears in something rotten, all you have to do is wait for gravity. Over the next few days, calls poured in. From agents, banks, even the supposed buyers. Apparently, the sale had been flagged. Fraudulent. Because you can't sell what you don't own. Each time the phone rang, I let it buzz a little longer. Just enough to let panic settle on their side before I answered with that same infuriating calm. Oh dear, you must be mistaken, I'd say. My property is managed under a family trust. Everything's in order. By the fourth day, she showed up at my door. Her lipstick was perfect, but her composure cracked at the edges. Mrs. Harris, she said stiffly, using my surname now. Distance replacing familiarity. There's a misunderstanding with the documents. We just need your signature to finalize. I smiled, stepping aside. Come in, dear. Let's talk. As she walked through my living room, her eyes darted. Over the photos, the furniture, the air that still smelled like security she could never buy. She was nervous, though she hid it well. You know, I said, pouring her tea, I always admired your ambition. Thank you, she said tightly. But ambition without respect, I continued, is like tea without water, bitter and dry. Her jaw tensed. We just thought— You thought wrong, I interrupted softly. She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. Not angry, just final. The house was never yours to sell. It was never your husband's either. Her smile wavered. But the deed is under my trust, ironclad, unbreakable, and registered through my lawyer. Your buyer's new nightmare. Her face drained of color. You planned this? I leaned back, calm as dawn. No, dear, I prepared for it. She left without finishing her tea, and as the door closed, I whispered to the silence, Now let's see how deep your greed really runs. That night, I called my brother again. Freeze their access, I said. He didn't ask why. He never needed to. Because when you grow up learning how easily love turns into leverage, you make sure your safety doesn't depend on anyone's mercy. The next morning, their accounts were locked. The buyers backed out. Their credit tanked overnight. I didn't celebrate. I just brewed my tea, let the steam rise, and watched the tide roll back across the empty beach, the one they thought they owned. The first fracture didn't sound like breaking glass. It sounded like a text message. One single buzz in the quiet of my morning. Mom, can we come over? We need to talk. 3 hours later, they were on my doorstep. She wore that red coat again, the one that always reminded me of danger pretending to be warmth. He looked smaller somehow, like guilt had trimmed him down. They came in without asking, as if the house still belonged to them, and in a way, I suppose they thought it did. She started the conversation. She always did. Mom, this whole house thing is a misunderstanding. The lawyer says the documents are complicated, but if you just sign the release, everything will be fine. I smiled faintly. Fine for who? Her eyes flickered. For everyone. No, I said softly. For you. My son looked up then, voice trembling. Mom, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought— I stopped him with a look. Don't use that word, thought. It makes it sound like you had a reason. He swallowed hard. We needed money. The business was failing. I was desperate. There it was, the confession wrapped in cowardice. She touched his arm like a handler calming her horse. Your mother understands, don't you? I did. I understood everything. The way she'd slowly turned him from a man into a puppet. The way she spoke for both of them. The way he'd let her. But I also understood something else. Desperation has a scent, and once you smell it, you know how to use it. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the ocean churn under gray clouds. You both look tired, I said gently. Would you like to stay a few days? Her relief was instant. She thought she'd won. Yes, that would be nice, she said, already scanning the room like a predator assessing its next territory. My son exhaled, almost collapsing into the sofa. Thanks, Mom. We just need time to sort things out. Time. That was exactly what I wanted them to ask for, because you can't expose a betrayal too early. It must be baked slow until guilt sweats from the skin. That evening, as I set the table for dinner, I watched her reflection in the window. She whispered to him in that tone, low, controlled, condescending. He's falling apart, I thought, and she's holding the pieces to ransom. When we ate, she complimented my cooking too much. That roast is divine, she said, smiling. Thank you, I replied. It was marinated overnight. Patience brings out the flavor. She didn't catch the meaning. He did. Later, after they'd gone to the guest room, I poured myself tea. The house was quiet except for the faint murmur of their argument behind closed doors. I heard her say, "Your mother's playing games." And him, broken, whispering, "Maybe we shouldn't have done this." I smiled into my cup. That was the first time doubt entered her kingdom. The next morning, she woke early, pretending to help with breakfast. She watched me from the corner of her eye as if waiting for me to crack. "Do you ever get lonely here?" she asked suddenly. "Not really," I said, cutting fruit. "Loneliness requires missing someone." She blinked, unsure how to reply. Her smile tightened. "You're strong, Mrs. Harris. Most women your age—" "Die quietly?" I said, turning to meet her gaze. "Not this one." She looked away. After breakfast, my son followed me to the porch. He looked older, tired lines around his eyes, shame sitting heavy on his shoulders. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know what she's told you, but I didn't want any of this." "Then why did you let it happen?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because she made it sound like saving us." I nodded slowly. "Some people call that love. Others call it leverage." He looked at me, eyes wet, broken. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "You're my son," I said softly, "and that's why I'll handle this my way." He didn't understand then, but he would. That night, I placed a call to an old friend, an accountant who owed me a favor. "Trace the funds from the beach house sale," I said. "Under whose name?" "Under hers." 2 days later, he called back. "You'll want to see this," he said. What he sent me wasn't just proof of theft. It was the blueprint of her empire. Secret accounts. Fake invoices. Money hidden under my son's name but spent on her pleasures. Vacations. Jewelry. A car he didn't even know existed. I printed everything and placed it in a neat envelope. Then I waited. The next morning, over breakfast, I slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Receipts," I said, smiling. "A mother likes to keep records." She froze as she opened the envelope. Her hand trembled. My son's fork dropped to his plate. "I told you," I said calmly. "The house wasn't the mistake. You were." She stood abruptly, rage flooding her face. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I leaned back, voice low and lethal. "Oh dear, I have every idea. You're just late to realize who I am." Her silence was the first real music I'd heard in months, and as she stormed out, I knew the fracture was complete. All I had to do now was let it spread. The air in the house changed after that breakfast. It felt cleaner, sharper, like the truth had opened the windows and let the poison out. I moved through the rooms as if they weren't there. That was the trick, to vanish emotionally while staying completely visible. I stopped asking if they wanted tea, stopped setting 3 plates, stopped caring if they whispered behind doors. Silence became my ally, and silence, when aimed correctly, becomes a mirror. It forces the guilty to see themselves. She started pacing more, always on her phone, always looking for someone to control. My son followed behind her like a shadow, unsure of its shape. That night, I found her in the living room pretending to read. "Can I help you with anything?" I asked, tone soft, almost kind. She looked up, startled. "No, just trying to relax." "Ah," I said. "Guilt doesn't rest easily." Her jaw tightened. She didn't reply. Later, I stood in the kitchen folding napkins. There's something powerful about small, precise movements when your heart is on fire, folding cloth when you want to break bones. That's emotional control, the kind that makes people underestimate you. The next morning, I heard them arguing again. He wanted to apologize. She wanted to fight. "Your mother's playing you," she hissed. "She's my mother," he said, voice cracking. "You don't understand her." "Oh, I understand her," she snapped. "She's dangerous when quiet." She wasn't wrong. By noon, I'd found her laptop open on the dining table, a draft email, unsent but telling. She'd written to a friend, "If she doesn't sign the release, I'll have to find another way. The old woman won't stop us." The old woman. How small those words looked against everything I'd survived. I didn't delete it. I printed it, then tucked it between the pages of her purse, folded neat and deliberate, like a signature she didn't remember writing. That evening, she confronted me again. "You can't just keep pretending nothing's wrong," she said, trembling with performative rage. "Oh, there's plenty wrong," I answered. "I'm just letting it finish itself." She looked confused, angry that she couldn't read my tone. That was her weakness. She needed chaos to feel in control, and I was giving her nothing. My son tried to mediate, voice soft, apologetic. "Mom, please, can we all just move on?" I looked at him long enough for him to flinch. "Move on," I said. "From theft, from betrayal, or from yourself?" He had no answer. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair, watching the moonlight slide over the walls. You can measure a person's character by what they do when confronted with your silence. By morning, she had made her choice. She packed their bags. I watched from the hallway as she whispered sharply, "We're leaving now." But he hesitated. Guilt had rooted him to the floor. "Without fixing this?" he asked. "There's nothing to fix," she said coldly, "just her ego." That's when I stepped out. "You forgot this," I said, handing her the envelope of receipts, the same one she'd left on the table 2 days earlier. She took it without looking, then froze when she saw what was inside, her own email printout, her handwriting on the corner. She looked at me, pale, terrified. "Where did you—" "From the truth," I said quietly. "It's easier to find than you think." She tried to speak, but my son stopped her. "Don't," he whispered. "Just don't." And for the first time since they'd come back, she obeyed him. They left that morning without another word. No hugs, no goodbyes, just the sound of wheels on gravel, and the faint echo of everything they'd lost before they even knew it was gone. I didn't wave. I just poured myself tea, slow and careful. Steam rose, warm and white, like forgiveness I'd never give. Because sometimes emotional distance isn't retreat. It's the highest form of revenge. 2 weeks passed before the storm arrived. Not thunder, not rain, paperwork. A thick envelope from the county registrar's office landed in my mailbox. Inside was a copy of the fraud complaint, her signature stamped in arrogance, my son's forged in desperation. They had tried to refile the sale through another broker. They thought changing lawyers would erase the truth. But my brother had already filed the counter notice. I read every line twice. Then once more, slow, steady, precise. Every betrayal deserves to be studied like a crime scene. That afternoon, I called my brother. "Activate phase 2, I said. He chuckled softly. You always were the calm one. I wasn't calm, I was focused. That night, I went through my old photo albums. There was a picture of my son at 8, holding a seashell standing on that beach. He looked proud, innocent, safe. And then there was one of me and my late husband, hammering wood together, laughing through the wind. He used to say, "A house is built with hands. A home is built with forgiveness." I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I closed the album. "Forgiveness," I whispered, "is earned, not inherited." The next morning, I visited the bank. I didn't go to withdraw. I went to transfer. Every investment account linked to my trust, locked down. Every asset with my son's access, rerouted. When you've lived a lifetime being underestimated, you learn that money, like silence, speaks only when you control it. By afternoon, I called my accountant. List everything under my name. Remove all shared beneficiaries. He hesitated. "That includes your son, Mrs. Harris." "Yes," I said. "Especially him." That evening, they called. My son's voice was cracked, almost pleading. "Mom, we just got a letter from the authorities. Something about a property claim and—" I cut him off. "Yes, I received one too." "What are you going to do?" "What I always do," I said softly. "Handle things quietly." Behind him, I heard her voice, sharp, accusatory. "She's bluffing. She can't stop us." "Then," I said clearly enough for her to hear, "why are you calling me?" Click. The line went dead. 3 days later, the headline appeared in the local paper. "Fraudulent property sale investigated. Couple under review for forged deed submission." Their names, in print, their shame, public, and my silence, the loudest thing in the room. That evening, I brewed my tea again, hands steady as ever. The ocean outside whispered like it knew the story, too. People think revenge is noise, breaking glass, raised voices, slammed doors. But real revenge is quiet. It walks in, takes its seat, and waits to be noticed. 2 nights later, he came alone. My son. Rain clinging to his coat, eyes red, shaking with guilt. "Mom," he said, standing in the doorway. "I didn't know she'd go this far." I didn't move. "You always knew," I said softly. "You just didn't stop her." He stepped closer. "They froze our accounts. I can't access anything. She's blaming me for everything." "Is she wrong?" I asked. He looked broken. The boy I'd raised, buried under a man I barely recognized. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry," I repeated. "Do you know what that word means? It means you're aware, not that you've changed." He didn't answer. He just stood there, waiting for mercy that wasn't coming. Finally, I said, "You have one chance to make this right." He looked up. "Anything." "Come with me tomorrow," I said. "Bring her too." He frowned. "Where?" "To the house you thought you sold." The next morning, they arrived together. Awkward, silent, dressed for confrontation. I led them down the old wooden steps to the beach, where the tide licked the shore like memory reclaiming its home. "This place," I said, "has seen more honesty than either of you." She rolled her eyes. "Mrs. Harris, this drama isn't necessary. We can talk like adults." "Adults?" I said quietly. "Adults don't steal what isn't theirs." My brother stepped forward then, briefcase in hand, expression neutral. He opened it, revealing the original deed. Her name wasn't on it. My son's wasn't either. Just mine. Her face went white. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "Oh, it's not just possible," I said. "It's permanent." My brother handed her a letter, official, stamped, final. Notice of nullification. All fraudulent transfers void. Legal ownership retained by Mrs. L. Harris. She tore the paper in half. "You can't do this," I leaned in, voice steady, surgical. "I already did." My son stood there, speechless, watching the woman he thought he loved unravel in front of him. She screamed, threw the torn paper into the sand, and turned toward him. This is your fault. You said she'd never find out." He didn't answer. He just looked at me. And in that single glance, I saw what was left of his conscience trying to climb out of the ruins. She stormed off, red coat flaring like fire in the wind. He stayed. "Mom," he said softly, "what do I do now?" "Learn," I said, "because ignorance isn't innocence." He nodded, silent. As the sun dipped behind the water, I looked at the waves crashing against the shore, the same sound my husband once called truth rehearsing itself. I felt no triumph, just balance. When I turned back, my son was gone. Only her footprints led away from the house, deep, messy, fading fast. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't lost my son. He'd just returned to the mother he'd forgotten I was. For the next few days, I didn't confront them. That's the thing about control. Once you stop chasing it, it starts to return to you on its own. Lorraine Harris had learned that the hard way. Michael and Vanessa walked around my house like new owners, rearranging furniture, whispering in corners, and laughing in low tones that used to fill me with warmth. Now, they just made my spine stiffen. They thought I didn't notice. But silence is a magnifying glass. It shows you everything people try to hide. Vanessa had begun taking long phone calls on the porch. Her voice was soft at first, careful, but every night it grew sharper, like a blade that forgot to pretend it was silverware. One afternoon, I stepped outside just as she ended one. She froze, phone half hidden behind her back. "Just work," she said too quickly. "Michael's friend from the firm." I replied, stirring my tea. "Must be important. You've been talking to him every day." Her smile faltered. Only for half a second, but enough for me to note it. I went back inside, slow and deliberate. That's how hunters move when the prey still believes it's safe. That evening, I checked my old study, the one Vanessa said was too dusty to use. The air smelled different, something metallic. When I turned on the lamp, I saw my old desk drawer slightly open. Inside, the keys to my beach house were gone. No panic, no shouting, just that cold clarity that always follows betrayal. They had already sold the house, or so they thought. But it seemed they were still trying to take more. I called Richard that night. My brother has always been the quiet storm in our family. Calm voice, sharp mind. "Richard," I said softly, "how hard is it to transfer a deed that doesn't legally belong to you?" "Impossible," he replied, "unless the owner's identity has been duplicated." That word sat heavy. Duplicated. He paused. "Lorraine, did Vanessa ever ask you to sign anything? Maybe a power of attorney?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, a month ago, when Michael was sick. She'd said she needed a temporary signature for hospital insurance paperwork." I signed without reading. "That's it," Richard said. "She's using your signature." I didn't say anything for a while. The silence between us was loaded. Finally, I whispered, "Don't stop her yet." Richard hesitated. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "Let her believe she's winning. It's the only way she'll show me how." Over the next few days, I became a shadow in my own home. Michael avoided my eyes more often now. Vanessa, on the other hand, had grown bold, too bold. She started hinting about upgrading their lifestyle, about how hard it is to start over after taking care of family. Family. She used that word like a weapon. I smiled through it all, folded laundry that wasn't mine, poured tea she didn't deserve, and watched as the truth began to leak from the cracks she couldn't control. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard her whispering again. I followed the voice down the hallway, barefoot, the air heavy with the smell of deception. "Yes, it's finalized tomorrow," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "Once the sale clears, the funds transfer straight to our account." Pause. "Don't worry, he won't suspect a thing." He, not Michael. Someone else. I didn't need to see her face. The tone said enough. Affairs and fraud have one thing in common. They always demand secrecy. By morning, I'd stopped pretending to be hurt. Now I was studying. I noted every call, every whisper, every time she slipped Michael's credit card into her purse. Richard came by under the pretense of dropping off some groceries. He handed me a small flash drive, hidden inside a bag of oranges. "Security footage," he murmured. "From the notary office. Vanessa visited last week, without Michael." I looked at him, calm but alive with something sharper than anger. "Perfect," I said. "Let's see how she likes watching herself get cornered." That night, I cooked dinner. Her favorite, ironically. Lemon chicken and roasted potatoes. The table looked warm, inviting, like an apology wrapped in comfort. But my eyes were steel. Vanessa walked in, smiling too wide. "Oh, Mom, you didn't have to cook." "I wanted to," I said softly. "I was thinking how family should always break bread together." Michael smiled nervously. "Yeah, it's been a while." We ate quietly. Every sound, knife scraping, glass clinking, felt like a countdown. Halfway through, I looked up and asked, "So, when's the sale going through?" The fork froze in her hand. Michael looked confused. "What sale?" I watched Vanessa's pupils contract, panic expertly disguised as politeness. "Oh, just some property thing," she said quickly. "You wouldn't understand, Mom." I smiled. "You're right, but I will soon." She went still. For the first time, she looked afraid. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I stood at the window overlooking the ocean. The same ocean that had once touched the beach house they stole. And in that quiet, salt-scented dark, I whispered, "Let's see how they handle drowning in their own lies." Because I'd already told Richard to make one small change to the transfer documents, a clause that neither of them had seen. By the time they learned what it meant, it would be too late. Morning came dressed in sunlight, but the house felt like dusk. You can always tell when a lie is about to collapse. The air gets thicker, conversations shorter, and smiles turn into masks that don't fit anymore. Michael sat at the breakfast table scrolling his phone, half present, half guilty. Vanessa poured coffee like she owned the place, nails sharp and perfect, voice honeyed. I poured mine too, black, no sugar, the kind of coffee you drink when you're done pretending to be sweet. "Sleep well?" she asked, pretending concern. "I did," I said, smiling. "You should try it sometime. It clears the conscience." She froze mid-pour. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I said softly. "Just talking about sleep." Michael glanced between us, sensing something but not brave enough to ask. That was his curse, confusion disguised as loyalty. Later that day, I visited the notary's office myself. The clerk, a young woman named Jenna, looked startled when she saw me. "Mrs. Harris," she said, fumbling papers, "I thought the deed transfer was complete." I smiled. "It is. I just came to pick up a copy for my lawyer." Her hands trembled slightly. "Of course." When she handed me the file, I saw it. My signature, forged cleanly beneath the words, "Power of attorney, perfect curve, perfect loop, not mine." But right below that signature was the clause Richard had inserted quietly. "Any unauthorized transfer under this power shall revert ownership to the grantor upon discovery." Discovery. That word meant I only had to see the fraud for it to legally crumble. And now I had. I left the office and walked to the pier. The ocean was calm, deceptive, like me. Seagulls screamed in the distance. And somewhere between their cries, I felt something rise in me. Not anger, certainty. When people betray you, they think they've ended your story. But sometimes, betrayal just becomes the outline for your next chapter. That evening, I set the trap. I invited them both for dinner again. Candles, wine, the smell of jasmine tea weaving through the air. The perfect picture of reconciliation. Vanessa showed up in that expensive silk blouse she'd bought with my money. Michael followed behind, nervous, pretending normalcy. "Sit," I said warmly. "We're celebrating." Her eyes lit up. "Celebrating what?" "Closure," I said. She hesitated. "Closure?" I nodded toward the table, at the neat stack of papers waiting beside the dishes. "Oh," she said, smiling. "The transfer. I was going to tell you, it's official now." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" Michael frowned. "Vanessa, what's she talking about?" She ignored him, flipping through the papers I'd laid out, printed copies of her forged emails, the notary footage, and one more document at the bottom. Her laughter died mid-breath. "What is this?" she whispered. "Evidence," I said softly, "of your talent for forgery and your remarkable inability to cover your tracks." Her face drained of color. Michael's eyes darted between us. "Vanessa." "What's she saying?" She stood abruptly. "She's lying. She's twisting everything." "Sit down," I said, calm but firm. The way she froze. That was the first time she realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I turned to Michael, voice gentle, steady. "Son, tell me something. Did you know your wife transferred my house using my signature?" He looked shocked. "No, that's impossible. Vanessa wouldn't—" I slid the notary footage across the table. Vanessa's face filled the screen, smiling, signing, shaking hands. He stared. "Vanessa," he whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. "Tell me this isn't real." She said nothing. Only her jaw moved, clenching, releasing, calculating. Finally, she managed, "I did it for us. You said you wanted to start fresh." "I said I wanted to rebuild, not steal," he snapped. Her composure shattered, voice rising, eyes wild. "She was never going to give you anything. You've been her puppet, Michael. I was trying to free you." I watched her, calm, detached, studying the ruins of her control. Then I spoke softly. "You freed him, all right, just not the way you planned." She turned to me, rage replacing panic. "You can't prove I forged anything." "Oh, but I can." I lifted the final paper, the notarized discovery clause, signed and dated this morning. Effective immediately. All unauthorized property transfers revert to Lorraine Harris. The silence that followed felt like thunder held in a fist. Michael's face went pale. "So? The beach house?" "Mine again," I said. "Legally, permanently." Vanessa's lips trembled. "You tricked me." "No," I said, standing slowly. "I learned from you." She laughed bitterly. "You think you've won? He still loves me. You can't take that." Michael's eyes stayed on the table, red and wet with truth. He whispered, "I don't even know who you are anymore." She reached for him. He pulled back. That simple motion broke something deeper than any legal paper could fix. Vanessa stormed out moments later, her heels slamming against the floor like desperate punctuation marks. The door slammed. The echo lingered. Michael stayed seated, face buried in his hands. "Mom," he said finally, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I swear." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I didn't punish you. I punished the silence that let her speak for you." He looked up, eyes full of regret. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we rebuild, without thieves." Later that night, I sat alone by the window. The beach house lights shimmered in the distance, like a ghost that finally forgave me. The papers lay beside my tea, signed, sealed, silent. Vanessa's perfume still lingered faintly in the air. The smell of loss disguised as luxury. I whispered to the night, she sold what wasn't hers, and lost what she never valued. Because power isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are after they try to erase you. The next morning, peace pretended to live in the house, but only fools believed it. I'd seen storms wear sunshine before. Michael left early for work. Vanessa stayed behind, pretending to tidy up, but her movements were restless, sharp, like someone packing rage into every gesture. By noon, she appeared in the doorway of my study. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "You've humiliated me." I looked up from my tea. I didn't humiliate you, Vanessa. You just took off your own mask. She crossed her arms. You think you've won? You think taking back that old beach house means anything? I smiled slightly. It means everything, because it means you no longer own the story. Her laugh was bitter. You don't get it, do you? Michael still loves me, and I'll make sure he never forgives you for this. I met her eyes, calm, almost kind. If that's the story you want to tell, go ahead. Just remember, truth has a habit of showing up uninvited. She turned sharply and left. The sound of her heels trailed down the hall, like a metronome counting down to her own ending. That evening, the house fell silent. Michael hadn't come home yet. The air felt too still, too heavy, like the quiet before glass shatters. Then the front door burst open. Vanessa stormed in, her hair messy, eyes red. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed. She threw a stack of papers on the floor, copies of the legal transfer. The lawyer confirmed it. You had that clause planted from the beginning. I didn't move. Yes, her jaw dropped. You admit it? I planned it, I said softly. The moment I realized you were the kind of woman who mistakes kindness for weakness. She stepped closer, voice trembling between fury and disbelief. You set me up. No, I said. You walked right in. Her breathing quickened. You ruined my life. I leaned forward slightly. You ruined your own. I just turned on the light so you could see it. For a moment, the only sound was her breathing, shallow, uneven. Then she said, almost whispering, You'll regret this, old woman. The word old rolled off her tongue like a curse. I stood up slowly. Age is not weakness, Vanessa. It's experience surviving people like you. She froze. For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not anger, but fear. And then, like the coward she was, she reached for the one thing she thought could still hurt me. Michael. He's not coming back, she spat. I told him everything. You manipulated him. He knows now. I smiled faintly. You told him everything? Good. That means he knows who really sold the house. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Because that morning, before she even woke up, I'd already spoken to Michael, sent him the footage, the notary files, every proof she'd hidden. When she realized it, the last bit of color drained from her face. You wouldn't, she whispered. Oh, I did. You see, Vanessa, you sold my house. But I sold your lies. The door opened again, and this time, it was Michael. He looked tired, worn down by truth. Vanessa, he said quietly, it's over. She turned to him, desperate. She's lying, Michael. She forged. He shook his head. I checked everything. The lawyer confirmed it. You forged her signature. You tried to transfer everything. Her face broke. That perfect composure finally cracking. Michael, please, she begged. I did it for us. He didn't move. You did it for yourself. He placed a small envelope on the table. These are divorce papers. You'll be gone by morning. She gasped, hand trembling as she reached for him, but he stepped back. That distance, that single silent step, was the real end. I watched her eyes fill with tears that came too late. You can't do this, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. I sipped my tea, calm and steady. Oh, you'll find somewhere, you always do, but this time it won't be here. Her lip quivered. You'll regret this. I smiled, the kind of smile that only years of endurance can shape. No, darling. Regret is what happens when you trust the wrong people twice. She grabbed her bag, stumbling toward the door. The house seemed to exhale as it closed behind her. Michael stood there, quiet, lost in the wreckage. I touched his shoulder gently. Son, I said softly, some storms don't destroy, they clean. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I didn't see her for who she was. You do now, I said. That's all that matters. As the night settled, I looked toward the beach through the window. the waves calm, reclaiming what was theirs. And in that still reflection, I saw myself, not broken, not bitter, just free. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It whispers, "You can go now." A week passed. The house was peaceful again, the kind of peace that used to mean silence, but now meant control. Vanessa was gone. Her perfume had vanished from the hallways. Her laughter from the lies she built had turned into a ghost that no longer haunted me. Michael began helping around the house again, slower, softer, like a man walking back into his own home after years in the dark. But I wasn't done. Justice isn't about revenge. Not really. It's about returning balance, even if you have to tip the scales with your own hands. 3 weeks later, the annual Harris Family Foundation Gala came around, a charity event I had founded years ago with my late husband. The same event Vanessa once said was too outdated for modern society. She had tried to rebrand it last year, with her name at the top. Now her absence was the main attraction. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers. The guests murmured with curiosity. Everyone had heard whispers. Vanessa left? Something about a house? Did you hear she was caught forging? I didn't confirm anything. I didn't deny it either. I just smiled. The kind of smile that turns rumors into truth. When I took the stage, the applause was polite, but warm. I stood beneath the golden light, calm and deliberate. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "This year's theme is simple: restoration, not just of homes, but of hearts." I paused. "Some of you know I recently recovered something precious. A beach house, yes. But more than that, my peace." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Michael stood at the side, watching, his expression quiet and proud. I continued, "Sometimes life lets us see people for who they truly are. And when that happens, we have two choices: revenge or restoration. I chose both." The audience chuckled, softly but knowingly. Then I gestured to the screen behind me. A slideshow began to play. Pictures of the beach house restoration project flashed across. The renovations, the children's wing, the community outreach plan, and finally the last slide appeared. A live video feed from the beach house itself. The banner outside read, "Harris Family Refuge, a home for women starting over." Gasps filled the room, because that house, the one Vanessa had tried to steal, was now a safe space for women she'd have looked down upon. That was my justice, not to destroy her, but to turn her theft into someone else's hope. After the applause died down, I stepped off stage. Reporters swarmed, flashing cameras, eager questions. "Mrs. Harris, is it true your daughter-in-law was involved in the property issue?" I smiled faintly. "She was involved in teaching me a lesson. I'll always be grateful for that." That line went viral the next day. Later that night, Michael approached me in the quiet garden behind the ballroom. "Mom," he said, voice low. "She called." I didn't look up. "And?" "She's somewhere in Florida, says she wants to apologize." "Let her," I said, "but don't answer." He looked conflicted. "That's cold." "No," I said softly, "that's closure." He nodded slowly. "You've changed." I smiled. "No, Michael, I just stopped shrinking." 2 days later, I visited the beach house for the first time since taking it back. The sun hit the waves like forgiveness. The walls had been repainted, soft cream, gentle light. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the rooms being renovated for the refuge. A young woman, a volunteer, handed me a clipboard. "We're naming this section after you, Mrs. Harris, the Lorraine Wing." I ran my hand along the doorway. Once the door Vanessa wanted for her own luxury spa. Now it would open for women finding new beginnings. Poetic justice doesn't need applause. Sometimes it just needs purpose. That night, as I packed up to leave, I received an email from an unknown address. It was Vanessa. Subject, "You win." Body, You turned everything I wanted into something I can't touch. Congratulations." I stared at the screen, then smiled. My reply was short. "No, dear, we both lost something. You lost control. I lost fear. Fair trade." Then I deleted it. No forwarding, no screenshots, no noise. Because the best revenge is to live unbothered while they rot in their own noise. When I got home, Michael was sitting on the porch, waiting. He looked up and smiled weakly. "How does it feel?" "Peaceful," I said. He nodded. "And her?" "She'll learn peace, too, the hard way." We sat quietly, the sound of waves humming in the distance. Then I said softly, "Funny thing about betrayal. It teaches you how to build without builders." He looked at me. "And what do you build now?" "Legacy," I said. "One they can't sell." The morning after the gala, the world felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped carrying people who only weighed me down. The ocean outside my window was calm. The same ocean that once swallowed my tears. Now it just listened. I poured myself a cup of tea, the same ritual I'd done for decades. But it tasted different today. Not sweeter, not stronger, just honest. Michael joined me on the porch, quiet and slow. He looked like the boy I once raised, stripped of pride, but clean of deceit. "Heading to the beach house later?" he asked. I nodded. "They're finishing the children's dorms today. I want to see the new names on the walls." He smiled faintly. "She would have hated that." "Yes," I said softly, "and that's exactly why it's right." We both laughed, the first real laughter between us in months. He grew quiet after a while, then said, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom." I sipped my tea, eyes on the horizon. Forgiveness isn't earned, Michael. It's granted. For your own peace, not theirs. He nodded slowly. Then he whispered, "You're stronger than any of us ever knew." I smiled. "No, son. I was just patient long enough to stop pretending weakness." When I reached the beach house later that afternoon, the workers were almost done. The walls were bright, the curtains white, and the air smelled of paint and salt water. Fresh beginnings. On the far wall, I saw the dedication plaque, "The Lorraine Wing," for every woman told she can't start over. I traced my fingers over the letters, feeling the weight of the past lift from them. This was what justice looked like. Not revenge, not punishment, but transformation. The house that once symbolized betrayal now stood as proof that love doesn't die. It just changes its audience. As the sun began to set, I walked outside to the porch. The ocean stretched wide and endless, glowing gold. In my reflection on the window glass, I saw not the woman they underestimated, but the woman who stopped waiting to be understood. My tea was still warm in my hand. I raised the cup slightly, whispering to the wind, "To peace, the kind they can't sell." The waves answered softly, pulling the past out to sea, and as the tide touched my feet, I smiled, not in triumph, but in freedom, because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "You made it home." 5 years later, I no longer lived in that big, echoing house. I sold it myself, not out of anger, but because peace doesn't need marble floors to echo. Now I live by the beach. Yes, that beach. The one they tried to steal from me. The one that watched me lose everything, and then build something greater from the wreckage. The Harris Refuge has grown beyond anything I dreamed. Every week, I see women arrive trembling, broken, afraid, and then I watch them leave walking taller, heads lifted, eyes alive again. That's when I know. The cycle ended with me. Michael visits often. He helps with the donations, brings his kids, and never forgets to hug me before leaving. They call me Grandma Rain, because when it rains here, I always make tea and tell stories. "Grandma," little Clara asked me once, "didn't it hurt when they lied to you?" I smiled. Of course it did. But sometimes pain is just strength that hasn't learned its name yet. She nodded, serious for a child, and whispered, "Then you must be really strong." I laughed softly. Strong enough to start over, that's all anyone needs. Some nights I walk down to the shore alone. The tide kisses my feet, the moon hums above, and for the first time in decades, I don't feel watched, I feel witnessed. I look out at the horizon and whisper, "They sold my house, but not my peace." And that's the thing no one ever tells you. When they take everything from you, they teach you what's truly yours. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead. So tell me, if it were you, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven them? Or built something stronger from the ashes like I did? If you've ever trusted the wrong people, this story is for you. And remember, my dear, they can sell your walls, but never your worth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these truths that too many women live quietly. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I love knowing how far these stories travel.